Welcome to Make It Plain, the Eric, Key, and Cameron Show. Our today's show, we will examine creation versus evolution. Get your Bibles. This should be a good one. This podcast is dedicated to addressing various topics from a biblical perspective, coupled with practical solutions for daily application. In essence, we want to take the Bible, which is relevant for all that we need in this life and the one to come, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, and we simply want to do what God commanded the prophet Habakkuk and make it plain. If you'd like to reach out to us, send questions or comments or make suggestions about the show, we love to address those, maybe even use those to drive our show content and simply create episodes that you guys want to see or conversation that you guys want to hear. Our email address is makeitplain, HAB22 @gmail.com. On today's show, we are discussing creation or evolution. And this is interesting because at some point in previous episodes, I almost want to say maybe season 2, we had discussed the existence of God. And really, when discussing the beginning, when we're talking about the beginning of all things, there are really only two alternatives. It's either creation or evolution. It really is not another option. Either everything in existence came from a divine mind who we know to be God, the God of the Bible, or we have to have life come from non-living matter, and that matter would have had to have always been here. So really that proves to us something too.
Right.
That proves that something has always been here. Yeah. That either that something is God or that something is inanimate matter. And now we're saying that life came from inanimate matter. But there are people who actually blend the two. There are people who blend the two. And I think very smart people call them theistic evolutionists, because they believe in God, but they also believe in evolution. They don't necessarily believe in creation, but they do believe in God. They believe in the Big Bang. They just simply believe it was God that said bang. They believe God said bang and hurled everything into its proper order. And they think this happened over the course of millions of years, which we will kind of address the fallacy in those arguments.
Which is nonsensical in the sense that nobody could have heard of bang because Adam wasn't created until day 6.
Right. So how would they have known that there was a bang or an explosion?
How would he have heard it day 1 through 5?
Yeah. Which would go against the scientific method. It would also go, because you cannot recreate the Big Bang, right? In order for a law to exist, it's got to pass the scientific method. Mm-hmm. And so one of those requirements is that, it happened over and over and over. You can test it over and over. Wow. The law of gravity. What goes up
must come down.
Like you can test that over and over.
At least that's what
and over and over.
That's what Mays and Frankie Beverly said. What goes up must come down.
Oh, I love my show. Well, I love this show. So, and I love doing it with my friends too,
sir.
Man.
Yes, sir.
I tell you, boy. But you can test that. The law of gravity, right? The law of thermodynamics. The law of matter is neither created nor destroyed.
Right.
The second law of thermodynamics, energy decreases over time. Like you can test that every time.
All things are running out.
All things run out. Right. And so energy decreases over time. You don't get more energy all the time, which actually would be evolution. Sure. But, you can't test the Big Bang.
Yeah.
That's why it's still a theory. Now they take the word theory off of evolution, but it's still a theory because you can't test it. You can't recreate it, even though billions of dollars have been spent, trying to recreate it, building these atom, colliders
Right.
and trying to, crush atoms together to recreate, and simulate the Big Bang, but they've never been successful and they won't be because it's not true.
No.
And so really there can only be one. It either has to be God or it has to be matter that has existed forever. And that results in the beginning of all things being either creation from a divine mind or evolution by happenstance and chance. And the people who are believe in God and also believe in evolution kind of want to deal with some of those positions first. So their positions are so why do they have their positions? Like why are some people who are Christians or profess to be believers? Let me use that. Those who profess to be believers, why do they believe in evolution?
Man wants to be smarter than God a lot of times, or either they want to be smarter than other individuals. So if I come up with a theory, it sounds real good. That's the whole thing about a theory. I look at it even from the standpoint of being in the counseling field. You have Eric Erickson, you have Sigmund Freud, you have all these other people who are known for their theories. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people simply just want to have something wrote about them. You think about somebody. you think about somebody like a Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, for as brilliant as he's supposed to be, he talks about. He's one who's very big on evolution and how things are. But it's when I start getting a name attached to me. But it's crazy how we can rally behind someone who has so much to say about a subject, but again, like you said, cannot prove it. Because if you go back to the Galapagos Islands, they talk about these finches and they say, oh, the beaks changed. That's not evolution. That's
adaptation.
Evolution would be an animal going from, or let's say, a monkey that evolves into a human. And as I always tell people, if you believe in evolution and the next time someone needs a blood transfusion, just go down to the zoo and get your cousin and get that blood transfusion. But nobody ever goes to the zoo to bother their cousin. Yeah,
kinfolk.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we evolve from them, that means that we will have some type of similar. We will have some type of some type of bond or some type of similar structure.
And I think they said like there's 98% matching DNA, but it's still not the same kind.
Well, and then too, I know if you said
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think so. When you say theistic evolution, I can see to some degree where for those who profess to be believers or Christian, that's a safe position.
Yeah,
that's a safe position. I don't want to be all the way evolution and be wrong, and then I don't want to be all the way theistic with God. So that's a safe position to take. But we obviously know it's wrong. But then I think sometimes, like you said, when people want their belief, their doctrines to be kind of perpetuated after they're dead and gone, it's like to some people that sounds plausible.
Right.
That you can have a God, but at the same time, you can have a God, but God is also interwoven into the fact that the world somehow evolved into what it is now.
Right.
So, it's one of those things that unless you take the standard, as we always go back to, and take what God actually said about creation, because nobody was there, then everything that's outside of the way God defined and specified creation is always going to come in contrast and conflict with what he said.
And it's interesting that those atheistic groups and those agnostic minds who believe in evolution, which ultimately says, in a nutshell, that things get better as time goes on. Mm-hmm. Things get more advanced as time goes on. These are the very same people who are fighting against carbon emissions. They're fighting against global warming.
Right. They're
fighting against fossil fuels.
Yep.
Because they're saying the earth is wearing down. Wait a minute. I thought, doesn't that go against what you believe in evolution? Shouldn't things be getting better regardless? Right.
If we evolve, I'm waiting on my superpower.
I know.
I'm waiting. Like, when do they had a thing that was like 2022, I believe. They were saying that
our first season. We were supposed to get our superpower. We was first season, episode 10.
I was hoping so.
Yeah, but it just ain't happened. I'm maybe my kids will get theirs.
I don't know, man. I hopefully I can fly, one day. But we'll see. But their position is, and they have these various positions for the theistic evolution is like you said, Cam. That's a very safe position, and I think the reason why it's maybe safe is because number one, they don't want to be seen as Bible thumping,
right,
religious fanatics and just being imbeciles for believing in stories that we as creationists believe truly happened, the flood, Eve being created from Adam's rib.
And not want to offend the scientific mind.
Right. Again, the pressure from academia. You don't want to, and depending on, depending on what your profession is, you may be ostracized for speaking that kind of stuff. And so maybe that's why they believe is because of academic pressure. Just in complete, they can't. In previous episode, we talked about closure, how people want closure when we talk about God's providence. And people struggle with God's providence because they want closure. And they want to be able to put their finger on something. And you just can't do that with God's providence. You just cannot put your finger on it. You just can't do it. Not even the Apostle Paul could do it. And so when it comes to creation, people want to be able to put their finger on it. Well, they can put their finger on evolution. They can. But creation, they can't put their finger on it. Because God made something out of nothing. And the people cannot fathom the idea that at some point there was nothing but God.
Ex nihilo.
Yeah, ex nihilo.
The Hebrew writer talks about it. Hebrews 11:3 or 4, something like that. And when you think about it, one of the things that's a consistent theme throughout Scripture is faith.
Right.
And so the fact that, that's that very substance, that very subject is mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11 with faith about God creating the world out of nothing. So what are we supposed to do? Accept that.
You have to.
By faith.
Yeah.
Because we weren't there.
Right.
We simply believe, okay, God, you said you did it like this. I wasn't there. My mama wasn't there, but daddy wasn't there.
And we don't just believe it because God said it.
It's the
which
evidence.
would be fine.
The evidence.
That's where I was going.
Right.
Because God has proven himself several times over that you should trust me because here's all the evidence. Right. What is Isaiah 1:18? God said, "Come now, let us reason together," said the Lord. Like when God appeals to man's reasoning and his mental faculties, he's asking man to use evidence. Like I'm not telling you to believe. Like I'm telling you this because you understand who I am. Like, check my track record. Come now, let us reason. Show me a time where I've ever not been who I've always said I was.
And he's asking you to use something that he gave you. Once again, going back to his creative power.
Right.
That's crazy when you think about it.
It's funny. I find that you have to have a lot of faith to believe that something came from nothing. Like there is nothing I could show you in this world today, and I could just tell you, look, it just magically appeared, and you'll believe it.
Right.
Like everything. If you see, I got a car outside, and I just said, man, Cam, it just magically appeared. It just happened. It poof, it came out of nowhere. But we will somehow believe that when it comes to the world and everything. Our little brother Mosier told us a joke when we were in preaching school. He said that man went to go see God one day, and man said, "I could do anything that you could do, God." And he says, "Prove it." And God says, "I want you to make a man out of dirt." And man reaches down and grabs the dirt, and God says, "That's my dirt."
Right.
How can
first you got to make the dirt to make the man.
Right. So and that's the point I make too. So I asked the question. I say, in Bible class, can anybody here make a sandwich? Everybody hand go up. But can you create a sandwich? Everybody hand go down. We can make a sandwich. Why? Because we got the bread, the meat, the lettuce, the cheese, stuff that's already in existence.
Right.
God created the material
out of, right.
To make. And that's the difference.
I've used this illustration. Close your eyes and come up with a brand new color.
You know what your mind is going to automatically do?
Gonna go through all the colors that
are already in existence,
and can't fathom what.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll mix two. It's already been done. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't. It'll drive you crazy.
Yep.
Close your eyes and try to create a new color. Yeah. That's proof of God, man. You can only operate off what you experience and what is already here, and that's really all science can do.
Yep.
That's all science can do. All science can do is operate on what's already here.
And true science
does
not contradict the
Bible.
Word of God. 1 Timothy chapter 6.
It does not. Verse 20.
Verse 20. Yeah.
Yeah. True science and oppositions of science, falsely called so-called gnosis.
Yep.
Right. The ability to know.
Yep.
That's what science is. Scientia is would be the word there. Which is
from which we get the idea of Gnostics
and diagnosis and prognosis and to diagnose.
Right.
So they misunderstand the Bible. Theistic evolutionists, they either don't want, they might have some kind of pressure, career wise or academically, or they just misunderstand the Bible. A lot of people, just misunderstand the Bible. Or I think, like you said, Cam, they just want to feel safe and they just want to believe it. They just like, what, this is what makes sense to me, even though it's opposed to the Word of God, which would go back to them misunderstanding the Bible, because if you deny creation as a believer, then you necessarily have to deny Christ, because Christ validated creation.
That's
right.
New Testament.
He validated creation. So that's where you're going to have a logical discrepancy with being theistic evolutionists. Yeah. So let's jump into them. So really there are three positions that the theistic evolutionists will hold. And we're not talking about the evolutionist who says, take the Bible, get it away from me. I don't believe in it. This is where the world came from, right? We're not talking about those people. We're talking about the people who actually consider themselves to be believers or theists, people who believe in God. That's from our Greek word theos, which is the word God or divine nature, depending on the derivative of the word. Yeah. So there are three positions that they generally hold, right? And of course, I know, we don't exhaust anything on in these episodes. I mean, we just don't have the time. And to be honest with you, I don't have the knowledge to exhaust everything, right? But what I do know. But the first one is called the myth theory. So in the myth theory is that Genesis chapters 1 through 11 are mythical. Like they're just fairy tales. They're just, chapter 12, we know that Abraham was a real person and he received real promise. Now, I don't know where he came from. If chapters 1 through 11, I don't know who his parents were. Right. If chapters 1 through 11 or not. But anyway,
Abraham related to Melchizedek.
Melchizedek didn't, who was he? Yeah. He must have been a myth too. But
father, mother.
I guess Abraham is Melchizedek, I guess. But even though he paid tithes to himself. Anyhow, the myth theory is chapters 1 through 11 of Genesis are mythical.
Wow. So I mean, you discount the flood, you get rid of the flood.
Yeah.
So not only was it,
and that's really what you're like, for real.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's too much evidence to support a flood. The flood was not a local flood. It was a flood. When he says, I'm going to flood all the earth, that didn't just mean like we're here in Dalton. It didn't just mean he was going to flood Dalton. If he told us here, if he said, I'm going to flood the world, all the world. So my question would be for the one who is a theistic evolutionist, like how can you pick and choose which parts of the Bible are you going to keep?
That's a good point.
Because if you can get rid of 1 through 11,
why stop at 11?
Why not get rid of Exodus? Why not get rid of Leviticus? Why not get rid of the whole New Testament? Why like there is no that they're playing it dangerous. I would say they're being dangerous instead of being safe with their picking, because There are too many key things that you miss in Genesis 1 through Genesis 11.
Well, you got to get Genesis 1 and 2. You're going to throw away creation.
Yeah, well, you throw human beings out. You can throw human beings if it was a. So we're mythical. We're mythical creatures then.
I mean, to ask these questions, you would, hope to get an answer, but because if the reason why the myth theory exists is because of the fantastical things that happens in those chapters, like the creation of man, like forming a man from the dust of the ground as a shell.
Right.
Adam was a shell.
Yep.
Until the Lord breathed into his nostrils, verse number 7 of Genesis chapter 2.
The breath of life.
Until the Lord breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Adam was just a shell. But then you get Eve, who is made from his rib. Right? And so you have that. And then you have the flood. Mm-hmm. And then you got these animals walking onto the ark. There are some very fantastical things. Like, don't get me wrong, they are fantastical.
Right.
And I believe every one of them. However, some people struggle with that, when we have been conditioned to listen to and follow the science. They tell us to follow the science, and the science really doesn't, fly in the face of it. But, when you're conditioned, through our education system and what's taught in our schools, if they're not private Christian, public school systems, and if it's not homeschooled and things of that nature, from a society standpoint as a whole, you are pushed away from religion and faith and the Bible stories and the Bible characters. And so, why not, like you said, why not, as a theistic evolutionist, why not get rid of, because if you're basing it on the fantastical things that happen in those chapters, then you got to deal with the plagues. Like, you got to deal with the 10 plagues. Those are fantastical, if anything, and the parting of the Red Sea.
You remember a couple weeks ago I sent the text out?
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain them gold chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea?
Who had gold chariot wheels?
Twinkies.
Pharaoh was riding on 20s, 26s.
They weren't high enough for the flood.
I wonder if they had spinners on them. You think they had spinners?
When the water came back, they weren't high enough.
They weren't big enough. I mean, man, they found sulfur balls that were ashed in their own ash. Only place on earth they were found. Right there.
Yeah.
Found a rock that had erosion, excuse me. A rock that had erosion coming from the inside of the rock.
Yeah. And we talking about this is stuff they found within the last, which I don't know how old the video was, but we just say last 50 years.
Right.
You're talking about stuff that happened 4,000 years ago, man.
Right.
And the effects of it.
Right.
Still is seen and felt today.
Right.
Man.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. But if anyone would refute and disprove the myth theory, it was Jesus. Let's go to Mark chapter 10.
Yeah. Repeatedly.
For sure.
Yes.
And what's so interesting is he wasn't doing it to refute the myth theory.
No. He was saying it as a fact.
It was axiomatic.
Yeah.
But yet here comes a come lately doctrine that he had already dealt with, right? And so how does the theistic evolutionist, deal with verse number 6?
Yep.
But from the beginning, Mark chapter 10, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. But that's not what evolution says. Evolution says there is no gender.
Yeah.
There is no gender at creation. Genders evolved through evolution. They didn't start at the origin. Evolution doesn't say that. But Jesus said that.
And he mentioned several things that are noteworthy. Beginning.
Yep.
I mean, time had a beginning.
Yep.
Creation. Which implies a creator. And then
the creator.
Right.
God.
And then he says male and female.
Female. Two.
That's a mouthful, man.
XX and XY chromosomes.
Yeah.
brethren, there's only 2 pair of chromosomes. It ain't XYZ. It ain't ABC. It is XX and X. Those are the only 2 pairing that exists.
Man, you know what's interesting? You ever notice when Rachel died? When Rachel died, you know what the text is? Her soul was in departing. So for everybody that says, well, you know what, trying to conflate the genders and all this, man, you can't change your soul.
No. That's a good one.
And it's amazing that, like, I mean, people think like, we go and pick these things out, man, but it's just there as a fact.
Right.
That, we can easily understand and accept if we're willing to.
Why can Jesus refute this position? Because he was there. He was there. And if you are a theistic evolutionist, that means that you are a believer in God. And I can imagine that you would be, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about mainstream religions like Islam or, anything like that. Or, Hinduism or Buddhism or anything.
World
like
religions.
World religions.
Right.
I'm talking about Christianity. If you in Christendom are a theistic evolutionist, and Jesus has clearly refuted the idea that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are myth because he quoted from them. He addressed them. And the reason he can and his credentials is because he was there. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, the same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Right. Verse number 14, and this Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory as the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus was there. Colossians chapter 1, verse 13 through 17. All things were made by him that are in heaven and that are on earth. Whether they be visible or invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. The reason Jesus could say that he made them in the beginning, because the he is he. He made them in the beginning, male and female. Jesus, like, that was me.
John 17:5.
Right.
Jesus in the Lord's Prayer, that's the true Lord's Prayer, John 17:5. Jesus says, and now, Father, glorify me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before
the world began.
Before the world was. He not only is stamping creation, he's also letting you know I was there and I took an active part in what I'm telling you about.
Right.
So
I was there. Before Abraham was, I am.
And he didn't say before Abraham was, I was.
Right.
He said before Abraham was,
I am.
Self-existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am. The guy Moses. You remember he was talking to somebody in that bush.
Yeah.
That was me.
That was me.
He said, man, you too young, man.
You're not even 50 years old, man.
What are you talking about? You ain't even got your
AARP card. On the side note, man, each of us are older than Jesus was when he died.
Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it?
You think about that.
That's crazy. Because before he died, when I was a kid, excuse me, when he died, but before I passed his age as a kid, you just looked at him as this man like this.
Mm.
And now I look back at Jesus, I'm like, he was a kid, man. He was a kid. He was 33, man.
33, man.
Yeah. I've lived past our Lord, man.
God is good.
He is all the time. He's still God.
Absolutely.
Even though I made it past the age that he made it to on earth, he's still my God.
Absolutely.
It's one thing to see him as a child being a father.
And that's what he was trying to get the Jews to understand.
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before Abraham was, I am. The apostles. So okay. You're a theistic evolutionist. You believe in God and evolution. Jesus didn't do it for you, which he should have. But that didn't convince you. Well, what about the apostles? The apostles taught creation as true. They didn't teach that Adam, Eve, Noah, all of those in those chapters. Paul and the apostles didn't teach them as fictitious characters.
That was history for them.
1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13 and 14. Yeah. Paul said, for Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in a transgression.
He said in 1 Corinthians 15, 45 and 47, the first man, Adam. Twice.
The first man, Adam.
The first man. That's like, man, that's mic drop.
Yeah.
He said the first man, Adam.
Somebody's lying. I can guarantee you it's not God.
No, it ain't. No. It ain't God. No, it's not God. It is interesting that they will find again these things to question these things in this regard being mythical. But going back to what you guys said, it's interesting that you would observe these passages. So if because Paul, when you're talking about 1 Corinthians 15, Paul said, if Christ be not raised, then our preaching is in vain. And we're found to be liars.
Right.
Like the apostles would be liars if Christ had not raised, because they claimed to have witnessed the resurrected Christ. Right. So if Christ hadn't raised, then they clearly are liars. Right. So if Genesis chapters 1 through 11 are mythical, then they will still be liars, because
they're quoting from it.
They are quoting. They are quoting from this,
Jesus, they quoted as history. As history. When Jesus,
historical events, like you can tie time to it.
Absolutely. When Jesus wanted to describe the destruction of Jerusalem, Matthew 24, he's like, in the days of Noe. In the days of the flood.
Right.
Like that happened.
That really happened.
Yeah.
But I fear, 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, but I fear by any means as the serpent beguiled Eve.
Right. Through
his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. Right? That Paul said that as a matter of fact. He didn't say, as in the old fairy tale of Eve. Paul spoke about that as if what about Adam and Eve and marriage? Ephesians 5:31.
Yep. I was just gonna say, we could just go down. We just go down the list. But man, two of the best sermons in the book of Acts. Acts 7, Acts 13.
Yes.
I mean, man, Acts 7. Stephen go through the whole Old Testament
history of the Old Testament.
Acts 13. Paul does the same thing, man. Mm-hmm. That's history. Matter of fact, that's their history.
Right.
And so it's stated as a historical fact.
And they believed it because they traced their lineage.
Right.
Right. They would be able to trace their lineage to Christ. Not to Christ, but to Adam and Eve, like through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They could trace their lineage, all the way back to the mother of all living.
Yeah. And to tie some things together, like, in an earlier episode, we talked about providence, and we're talking about history now because the Old Testament history. How do you account for Isaiah 44:28, Isaiah 45:1, Cyrus being mentioned by name?
Yeah.
If that's not history.
Yeah. If the Bible is not a history book, but it does not oppose true history.
Right.
It's not a science book, but it's not in opposition of true science.
Yeah.
I mean, you have authenticated historical documentation in the Bible that's being confirmed and discovered every day. It seemed like every day,
right,
some kind of excavation, some kind of archaeological dig is proving the Bible. It seemed like we getting that every day. But you know what? Does the scientific community come out and say we wrong? No. But let us be wrong.
They're going to double down on
Boy, let Christians be wrong.
Man. Yeah, and this should have been settled, man, back in 1947 when that shepherd boy found those Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah. That should have been the end of it, man.
Should have.
But it's like we could, like you said, every year, every decade, we keep getting hit with more and more evidence. it's just, man.
I can't wait to see what more they find, or guarantee you as the Euphrates River continues to keep drying up,
man.
You know, and even the Dead Sea also. Right. The Dead Sea, I wonder what we'll find more.
I'll tell you, man. So Adam and Eve were not fictitious. Noah was a real person. Second Peter chapter 2, verse 5. You know, God didn't spare the world of old. He didn't spare it. And Peter discusses Noah being the eighth person.
Yeah.
You know, Noah, the eighth person,
a preacher
of righteousness. Bringing in the flood to the world of the ungodly. Right. You know, Noah was a real person, and Peter spoke of him as a real person. You cannot accept the other teachings and writings and preachings of Peter and discount when he talked about Noah. Sure. You can't do it. You can't do it. It would be dishonest at best.
And if you talk about the flood, like, okay, let's just say, okay, well, I'm not even going to care what you preachers are saying on that podcast. How do you account for the rainbow in the sky?
I would imagine that they would say, oh, that when they made up the story of Noah, they could look up and see a rainbow. So they just included that in the story. I would imagine that this is what they would say.
But then you have to account for it getting it. How do you get it up there?
That's true.
Hey, man.
They'll blame us type of gas. They'll be like, well,
that's just a Skittles commercial.
Yeah. That's just the light refracting off the water, and you can see the spectrum of colors. Because you can do the same thing, just kind of look in your mirror, look in your bathroom, and, just look. You can look down a water puddle and you can see a rainbow. They have all of these.
It'll be something.
Yeah, it will be
it's
something.
Amazing when you think about it.
I know it, man. It's that's God's promise, though.
Yeah,
that bow in the sky, man.
So do the theistic evolutionists? Do they? Because I don't know anything about. I don't think I even know one, or didn't know they were one. Do they attend like services and do like? Are they like?
Oh, yeah. There are some, man, and it's just like anything else. Theistic evolutionists, they may not be very vocal, but man, listen, I can promise you, I promise you this, and I know this to be true. I know this to be true from my own experience. There are members.
Hey, I knew it
in the Lord's church that are sitting in pews every Sunday and don't believe what's in this book.
And a lot of these members got private views, irrespective of all the teaching and preaching that goes on week in and week out.
Right.
And they hold these private views. And I think you mentioned earlier about, I think Key having a platform, and they have these platforms now, and they can get on these platforms, hide behind these computer screens and stuff like that. And they can spread and disseminate these different views and stuff like that. But
have y'all ever been asked to speak at places? And this has probably happened to me maybe 3 times in my tenure of preaching. And as a matter of fact, I love the practice. I wish churches did it more. I wasn't offended by it in the slightest. But I think I was either going to do a gospel meeting, and maybe it happened at a lectureship or something. But they'll give you this questionnaire. Have y'all ever received a questionnaire to fill out before you got to go speak at a place?
Man.
like a 100 question questionnaire or something like that, which I wasn't offended by. It's happened to me like maybe 3 times.
But I believe it's a good safeguard.
I love it.
Right.
I wish we do it more.
Absolutely.
And so I had the grand idea. I said, you know what? I'm going to give this to the congregation. So I talked to the elders. I said, listen, man, they've given me, I've received this thing. This was at my previous work. So I've received this thing. I like it. I said, I wonder if we gave it to the congregation anonymously. Right. So what we did is we gave it to the congregation anonymously. Like they didn't have to put their name on it. They just had to answer it and just slide it under my door. Right. Just we collected them all. We tallied up the score. We tallied up the answers. Gave me something to preach. It gave me stuff to preach on for a whole year. Right. It told me where the congregation was, man. Like there are people sitting in pews, Key, that don't believe you got to obey the gospel to be saved. They don't believe you need to be baptized to be saved, but they sit there every Sunday. Now, they'll never tell you that. They won't say it, but they'll say it anonymously.
And another thing about that, we're not even talking about question where they got to explain.
Right.
You know, so these are just, you know, what do you believe about this? You know, do you know the book, chapter, verse? Man, if you had a question on it, well, you have to actually like explain creation,
right,
from a biblical standpoint,
right?
Oh man,
and so they won't tell you that, but they'll tell you anonymously. So I would imagine that there are people sitting in pews who believe in evolution. They believe that evolution happened.
Have you ever had, like, if you go out to do a meeting or something like that, and you know the local preacher is sound, eldership is sound, and you may be preaching something, and the brother, sister, you know, I don't believe that.
Yeah, I mean,
like, what do you mean? I did a meeting 2 years ago, man, and the guy wanted to take me out to dinner. I said, man, it's a great gesture, you know, hospitality. I'm in a different place, but he wanted to take me out so he could grill me. I'm just like, man. So I told the elder, I said, hey man, do y'all know he believed this? And they was like, yeah, we trying to work with him. But like you said, man, you got members sitting there, man. And here you are, the visiting preacher. Oh yeah, you finna, you gonna get it.
You gonna get it now. You are gonna get it.
I'm gonna get somebody to listen to me,
man,
because they not listening to me. I can get you to listen to me. And I can sway you, and that happens all the time. People think they're gonna sway me. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this a while. I'm pretty convicted in what I believe. It's not because I just learned it yesterday. It's because I've mulled over this. I've prayed about this. I've studied this. I believe this because I believe. I'm not quick to jump on something just as, you know, in a whimsy. You know, I want to make sure that I'm right, and so I'm very thorough in my investigation of topics. And if I find out I'm wrong, I'm short, you know, I'll study and make sure I'm right. But some of this stuff, man, it's just like I've actually studied that and argued that several times. So no, I don't believe it, and you're not going to sway me, but I'll listen. So then the second one is outside of the myth theory. And like I said, man, we can go on and on, but outside of that is the gap theory. Now, the gap theory says that there is a gap in time between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 2. Not even chapter 1 and chapter 2. Just there is a gap in between chapter 1 and verse 1 and chapter 1, verse 2. And so they say Genesis 1:1 was when God was bringing the world into the state of perfection. And then Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 is when the world fell, and that's this renovated state. And so that there is a gap in heaven. And in the gap was when the war in heaven happened, when Satan was cast down, when he afflicted the earth. And then God, in verse number 2, he renovated the earth. In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And they say this was the perfect state of the earth. Verse number 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. So they say, this theory says that in between those two verses is this gap of time where the world, I mean, you know, excuse the fact that this happened in Genesis chapter 3, but the world fell, right? And so, you know, God had to renovate it. You know, he had to reform it, and that's what they say as far as that's concerned. However, Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, when it says, and the earth was, that's your Hebrew word, heya. And it means existed, has ever been. Like it ever was that. You know, that's what it was. It didn't just start being that.
It's been already.
That's what it was.
Right.
You know, and so you know, you have an issue with the gap theory, and sometimes you ask the question, where y'all come up with this stuff? Like, what? How did you read that into there?
Absolutely,
because there is nothing in that where you can read that into. We call that eisegesis. Like, there's nothing that you can do. There's no way that you can properly even eisegete
into that.
And you can't even read that.
You would have to read something supplementary to the Christian,
for sure,
to even interject that in there.
To end it,
but then where would they get it? Like, where did they? It's like a Wikipedia page. Anybody can put it. You can make up anything. But again, that's how come.
Hey man, you'll be looking at some of these Wikipedia pages, man, and somebody be like, somebody dead, and they just died. Like, man, that person's still alive.
Yeah, have you all thought out, man?
But that's essentially because of theory. Now again, I've not been in school for a while, but I do know what a theory is.
Right.
And a theory is exactly and we're talking about now, there's no way for them to prove it. And again, if you go into the old scientific methods and the steps to go through it, I know basic science. I can remember basic science. And if you apply the basic of science to these theories, it makes for a fantastical story on Disney or some movie theater. But compared it to eliminate or say that, to read into it and say to get with the gap theory, you had thousands of years that's passed, and now you limit God because God can do instantaneous. Like he speaks it and it's done.
Well, that's the issue they have with that third one that we'll talk about, the day age theory. Well, but that is the very issue that you really have to deal with, limiting a omnipotent God.
Well, think about it from so if you read Genesis 1, 2, and 3 chronologically, you just read through. So if you say, for the person that says Genesis 1, then there's a gap of time, then God renovates earth in Genesis chapter 2, how do you make up a Genesis chapter 3?
Right.
Just by reading it chronologically, because then after the events of Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 through 6, he would have to recreate that situation and refurbish it to make that better.
You're right.
But so it's going to be this constant pattern that after every bad thing
in Genesis 6, you have to do it again.
Absolutely. But you can't even read that into the text chronologically. Just read through the Bible.
So I'm just looking at, before we go on to the next one, I just realized this because I've been using this Bible lately because I like some of the footnotes, but this is where the footnotes go crazy. In verse 2, it says, the earth was without form and void. Some understand a gap of an interdeterminate period of time between verses 1 and 2 and translate became rather than was.
Written right in there.
In the footnotes.
So that's why I said, so I can see how somebody will believe,
right.
If you're using this Bible and you're studying that, so that's what it means.
Right.
Now, see, that's
the footnote says, well, some say, that's what your footnote
it sound like Matthew 16.
Well, some say that thou art John about, but it does exist. It's even written in the footnotes of your Bible.
Yeah. Who made this Bible? Let me see who made this Bible.
There's a gap between verses 1 and 2, and it's a real thing. So you asked question, Key, earlier. Like, Key said, I don't even know nobody that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Key said, I don't even know anybody that believe this stuff. But
yeah. Is it?
It's in there.
Hey, you know somebody now.
Now I know somebody.
Listen, you might know the somebodies, but you know that somebody's teaching that. But when you consider Isaiah 45, verse 18, I think this might have been where you were going, Cam.
Yeah.
For thus saith the Lord, that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it, he created it, watch this, not in vain.
Right.
Now, if we just simply cross-reference this with chapter 1, verse 1 of Genesis, in the beginning, God created, Isaiah has to be making reference to that passage. If that's the case, notice what Isaiah said. He didn't make it in vain. So you can't have an interdeterminate period of renovation because God don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
When he made it, Isaiah said he formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord and there is none else. God said, I made the earth the way I made it because that's the way I made it to be inhabited. I didn't make a mistake. I made it look old.
And then
for a reason.
And then that will fly directly in the face of Genesis 1:31.
Yes.
When God sees everything that he created.
And it was good.
It was good. Basically perfect.
Right.
For
why he created it, for what it was meant to do.
So guess what? They got Isaiah 45 and 18 as the next thing.
What kind of...
Hey, if that ain't theistic evolution...
Look, now, there's crazy.
Got scripture next
Man,
to...
Key, what kind of Bible Key got?
See, look, but it's crazy. It says that it goes to make that same thing, saying that, like... Let's see. It says, after that, it says, in other words, the initial creation was formless and empty and conditioned, soon remedied. See Isaiah 45 and 18.
Yeah.
And look at
It says soon remedied.
In Jeremiah 4:23, Jeremiah says, God says, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light.
That was verse 1.
That's,
So how, that is interesting.
yeah, that's
So where is their citing? What do they cite? What do they reference from God that says that?
they can't give you one.
They can't. And it's written right there in that Bible.
But I'm saying, but that's to me, that's a perfect illustration of theistic evolution.
Right.
You got the
In
gap,
the word.
the gap theory right there in the footnotes, and then they got a scriptural reference that disprove what they try to get you to read.
What they actually trying to tell you.
That's crazy.
You can't have it both ways.
Because Isaiah says the very opposite of what they are proposing.
Man, look here. As the young people say, man, you can't make this stuff up, man.
No, man.
No, the young people say
Like, that's crazy. Yeah, the cap.
For sure. The logic ain't logicking.
Hey. That's capping for real.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. That's ridiculous. And in Matthew chapter 19, verse 4, we know this passage well.
Mm-hmm.
And he answered and said unto him, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? At the beginning. Like God didn't make a mistake. Jesus closed the gap.
So Matthew 19 covers your Genesis 1 down all the way from Genesis 2 to Genesis 2, verse 7.
Yeah, it does.
One continuous train of thought.
Right.
From creation day 1 to day 6.
Yeah.
Man.
Can't make that up.
All the way.
Nope.
Jesus closed the gap.
Yep.
Like he closed that gap.
Yep.
Like that was a good addition to this episode. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm saying this might like literally. Did you
find out the publisher? What
it's
publisher?
Rye. It's some Rye Bible. RYRIE study. So it's a study Bible.
Ryrie.
So I got to look them up and see who they.
Interesting.
Who they are.
Typically in the preface, it'll tell you. If you flip over again.
Let's see. To the reader.
Yeah. If you'll read that preface, it'll tell you who the authors were. It generally tells you their religious background and their religious views and, their religious influence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
It'll typically tell you that. That's interesting. Well, as Key surveys that.
Look at the providence of
God. Listen, God said, I'm going to kill all this false stuff. I love the psalm in Psalm 119, 104. Like, through thy precepts, I get understanding, and I hate every false way.
And he say the same thing in verse 128.
Man, God said, I'm going to destroy this stuff, man.
I esteem that precept concerning all things to be right.
It's right.
And I hate every false way.
Man, hate every false way. Man. So the last one we want to consider with the time remaining is the day-age theory. So, you know what? This is a good practice for our viewing audience. Go to y'all's Bibles, look at those footnotes, make sure that, as one of my instructors in school, when I was attending school, Brother Tom Bright, God rest his soul, he was the director of school that I attended. He said commentators are common taters. Like they just people.
Right.
Like don't get, even in the church,
man.
Even in the Lord, even sound brethren.
Right.
Like, like reference their writings, look at what they may say about a passage. They, they're likely very studied, if we consider them high esteem, and we can name some, but we're not. That we all would consider to be,
but be a Berean.
But still be a Berean.
Yep.
You'll still apply the Berean test.
Got to.
This is a great exercise for our viewing audience. Make sure that your footnotes don't contradict the clear, simple word of God.
And to piggyback off that, make sure that your version of the Bible is not one of these new age corrupted version that's telling you the scriptures as opposed to giving you what God actually said.
Right. Simply translating it.
Right.
Yeah, when you look at something like the NIV, where they say they're a thought for thought, they're not a word for word translation.
Yeah.
They're a thought.
So you have some versions that have, and we might need to do an episode on translations.
Probably should.
But yeah, that one's coming up. We need to do that for real.
Yeah.
But you have some translations that interpret the Bible rather than translate it.
Right.
And that's what you want. You want a Bible that simply translates word for word.
Yeah, that's it.
Not the thought.
Yeah.
The words. The thought is already there.
Yeah. And translation is going from one language to another language.
That's it.
That's it.
Simply.
Yeah.
So let's consider, with the time we have remaining, the day-age theory. So the day-age theory, and we have heard this, one day with God is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. That's the day-age theory, but that is not what Peter said in 2 Peter 3:8. He said one day with the Lord is as, that's called a figure of speech, a simile, where you use like or as.
Right.
What Peter was saying in 2 Peter 3:8 is that one day with God, because he stands and sits and operates outside of time, one day with God might as well be 1,000 years. And by the way, in the context of 2 Peter 3, he's not even discussing creation. Not even talking about creation.
No.
He's talking about the persecution.
As a matter of fact, he's refuting their false doctrine from creation.
Right. He's using creation to refute their false doctrine.
Right.
That God's not coming.
Right.
Like then they were being persecuted because they believed that Christ was coming.
You know
again.
what? All things from the beginning of time continue as they have been.
All things.
Okay.
You know, where is his coming? Everything is just going on along as it has from the beginning of time. But Peter said, well, one day with the Lord might as well be 1,000 years, and 1,000 years might as well be one day. So if 1,000 years is one day, you can do some simple math. How long are mornings and evenings? Genesis 1:31. If one day is 1,000 years, well, how long is a morning? I guess that's 500 years.
500 years.
I guess that's a morning is half a, morning is half a day, I guess, if you went on 12-hour, scale. The day, yom, there in the Hebrew, it means sunset to sunset.
Yep.
Like it's
literal 24 hour.
It's a literal 24-hour period. So how long is a year then? Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. God gave us time for seasons and for years. So if a year, we can know what a year is. If one day is 1,000 years, then how long is a year? You have to multiply 365 by 1,000, right?
That's 365.
That's crazy. Plants, and our time is getting away. Plants were created on the third day, but sunlight was created on the fourth day. How did the plant survive 1,000 years without sunlight? God created the world in 6 literal 24-hour periods. The Sabbath day was 1 literal day out of 6. Exodus 20:11. They knew that one day was one day, right? The day age theory does not compute. My goodness, Methuselah should still be living. Can you imagine how old he would be? He lived to be what, 969?
969.
969 times 1,000. No, 365. Sorry.
Yeah.
Times. Yeah.
Wow.
365 times 969. That's crazy.
Yeah, I can't do that math for my head.
Well, listen, we got to close up. That was good, Key. I'm glad that came up. Yeah. If you'd like to reach out to us, please contact us through our email address. Make it plain, hab22@gmail.com. We love to entertain your questions and comments. May God bless you and keep you as you seek to conform your will to his.